Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Disrupt the Defaults podcast. Today, we have a special episode. It's a little different than usual. We are going to talk all about Word of the Year. I know it's something some of you may have every year. Maybe it's something you heard about and you've never tried it. So, this is a time to think through what that word may be, or maybe just get some new ideas. And we have a special guest today, a dear friend of mine, Yarminiah Rosa, who is a creative director, a photographer, the founder of Purpose Rosa, and so many other things. I'm like, what should I even say? Because you do so many things. You're so talented. So narrowed it down there. But welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, Rachel. I'm so happy to be here. And thanks, of course, for inviting me, but also making the space too.
So we meet, I don't know, every other week and talk about life and work and all the things. And so many of these conversations we've said, why we should have just recorded. So I'm excited to actually press record. I would love to hear, how do you approach this whole word of the year thing?
I don't have like a certain strategy. I really try to wind down and then figure in some way. Even if I can't hit all of the areas of my life where I'm winding down, I at least want to be in a mental space where I can reflect and then also hear from God, like what is the next thing or what general area do you want me to be moving in?
Yeah.
So I do practice journaling a lot, and sometimes I'll just write some stuff out and see a theme, or throughout the year, I'll be note taking and realizing the patterns that I'm seeing pop up. And I'll have the space of mind to just see, like, oh, okay, well, this has been a recurring theme that I either want to coach or do better at next year or explore. And so that's the strategy, I guess, is just being in a mental space where I can actually hear from God what's next, or
Yeah.
even from my intuition about where I want to focus on.
Yeah. And you are so good at being able to do this for yourself, but also help other people with figuring out what their vision is. I know you've hosted workshops on this before. Do you feel like that's connected to this at all?
I do, mainly because having a word of the year is like a theme, and it's a theme for your life. If your life's a
Mm,
movie, it's like, what am I continually going back to? And
yeah.
so some of that requires vision, but a lot of times it's really about not knowing, not knowing everything, and
Yeah.
just having an idea of the general direction you want to go to. So in that way, it is related to being a visionary and having and stewarding a vision. It's like you have an idea and you know the general direction, and you're going to figure it out along the way and stay committed to a general theme that you can look back on and say, hey, like I stuck to something that was in my brain and tried to make it a reality.
Tell me more about this not knowing, because I think that's part of stress for some
Yeah.
people when it comes to setting these goals. Some people do resolutions. I haven't done those in a long time, but like New Year's goals, word of the year. How do you know if you did enough for it or did you stick to it? This not knowing piece for some people can feel counterintuitive to that. So tell me more what you mean there.
Yeah. And I've spoken about this where
Hmm.
I'm really, this last couple of years have been really working on shaping my relationship to time and planning a bit better. And by better, I mean like better for me, the way that I think planning ahead sometimes doesn't make sense in my brain
Yeah, that's
because
real.
there's so much unknown. And so I've been really working on being not just somebody who loves being present, which I do, but somebody who is in the present moment, also planting seeds for future me to be content and to be provided for. So not knowing is really the foundation of life. There's so much we don't know, like we will
Yeah.
never know. Uh, and I think it's inextricably tied to faith as well. Um, Not knowing the way one person might handle not knowing is so different from person to person
Mhm.
that we each have to develop our own strategies for how do I develop a life philosophy? How do I actually show up in life when there's so much I don't know? Either be freaked out about it, or you can try and be proactive and get yourself some systems so that
Yeah.
you're actually able to show up in life. So not knowing is foundational to being a human, and I really have. I remember there was a time, it was like 2018, when I would joke with a friend of mine that there was no sense of guideposts in my life. Like
Mm.
I was really looking for guideposts. Like that word just kept coming up, where I didn't have a sense of like, this is a non-moving aspect of life. It felt like everything was shifting always, and I wanted like some sense of like stability, security. And that led me to feeling like, oh my gosh, there's so much I don't know. There's like, what can I really stand on?
Yeah.
And at that time, I turned to so many different things like astrology and trying to get my sense of grounding through the stars and the elements and earth. And now have evolved past that. But I think we all have our systems of like finding a way of coping with the unknown. And part of what I do with the Vision Section workshops that I teach is give people a framework to pace themselves in the
Mm.
unknown and give themselves their own guidelines. Approach vision from a place of this is more of a cycle in a circle rather than a linear thing that I have to go from point A to point B.
I love what you said too about pacing yourself in the unknown, because even though there's so much we don't have control over, we also are a very active participant in our lives, and we do make a lot of decisions that influence, who we are and where we're going. And so I like this idea of how are you setting the pace, and this idea too of, these word of the year goals, your vision, all these things aren't tools to restrict you to one specific path or to follow one way of being forever and never changing. They really are ways to support your journey, knowing that like there's going to be so many things that change throughout that journey and you're able to adjust. So I like that idea of like pacing yourself through it all. And this is something when we connected, we met in Bali in 2019, and which feels like a different world a lifetime ago.
Wow.
And then we reconnected in Costa Rica earlier this year in January. And I remember us talking, we were both talking about this idea of like time and planning came up. And I remember a conversation with you where I said, I plan in a certain way for my brain, but I don't really like planning. Like I wouldn't call myself a planner, but I also do a lot of planning. And that kind of started some of these conversations. And so I wanted to encourage folks who also think I'm not someone who wants a ton of structure in my life, or I don't like to plan too much, that there's room for that in your life. Cause I also consider myself one who likes more freedom in my life. I'm not someone who wants, being on like having a schedule and having to be on time for all these things every day is stressful to me. So the planning can actually lead to a level of freedom because
Yes.
yeah, it's like a piece of your planning should include, if you're not planning from a place of acceptance that you don't have control over everything, then you're basically planning, for failure or planning for stress. And so what you're saying is kind of the foundation of all this before you even create a word of the year. You have to come to it with the perspective that this isn't something, these goals, these words, they're not something to try to control your life or to restrict it, but you really are, you're making a plan that leaves room for all the other things that you couldn't even see, good or bad.
Mm. And people who I categorize people like people who plan and people who don't.
Yeah.
And it's really not that black and white
Yeah.
because in my mind, as somebody who formerly identified as a non-planner, I really saw people like you
Hmm.
as like, because they're good at it, they have a better grasp on the world or have a better
Hmm.
grasp on how they spend their time. I think it's just in my mind, it was a way to categorize people as
Yeah.
like, you can do this or you can't. But I love the nuance of you saying, like, I'm good at this, but I don't like the structure of knowing everything that I'm going to be doing,
Yeah.
at every moment. I actually like the freedom. And that was a shift for me, was not seeing it as something restrictive, but seeing it as something that's
Hmm.
going to give freedom. And I see that the word of the year as a way to be the guidepost and as a way to be checking your values and
Mm,
how they
yeah.
align with your actions throughout the year. It's really a catch-all phrase for the value that's the most important. If I'm thinking about it, so you have the word in
Hmm.
your mind and you hold it up to a mirror, like that, the opposite of that, I feel like is going to be what the value that you want to work on is. So for me, the word, my word of the year is risk.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm thinking about it, the value behind that is wanting to be more faith filled. And so there's always something under what your, word of the year is. It's like, this is the catch all phrase, but there's so
Yeah.
much more that you're trying to access by aligning yourself with that word.
That's so true. And you said your word is risk. Do you have a plan for how you want to implement that in your life, what that may look like, knowing it could change, but starting out, is there a way that you are taking steps to say, okay, I'm embracing risk in my life right now?
Okay, I actually been thinking about this because you were asking me about a gift that could encompass this. And I was like,
Yes.
what would that be? And I was really like, a lighter? Like, that seems risky. I used to be afraid of lighters growing up. Like, I would
Ah,
never like
okay.
touch matchsticks or anything like that. But then I was like, I actually think it requires a lot of self-reflection. And then I'm looking at this mirror behind you. I'm like, I haven't really landed on what that gift would be, but
Uh-huh.
I last was thinking about a mirror, like a compact mirror or something. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
I make jewelry with mirrors. I'm like, this is so meta. But I'm just like, I don't ever carry a compact mirror and I don't ever really look at myself once I've left the house. But the self-reflection required to know when I'm actually taking a risk versus going back to comfort
Ooh, that's
is
good.
is going to require a system that I don't necessarily have yet. To answer
Yeah.
your question, no, I don't have a system set up for how I'm going to make sure I'm taking risks because right now it's just intuitive. It's like, oh, I know I could have
Mm-hmm.
done or gone an extra mile in putting myself out there in XYZ way, but I didn't do it. And it's such a quiet thing, right? Like
Yeah.
when we don't take the risks that we know we want to take, nobody's going to be there to tell you, like,
Yep.
girl, you should have done that. It's always an internal dialogue.
Oh, that's
So,
good.
yeah, holding myself accountable in some way is going to be a challenge, but I'll check back in and I'll let you know when I've figured that out. It will require discomfort, yes, but a way to invite the discomfort.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we hear about, oh, you got to get uncomfortable to do your goals, da, 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 da. And that's with planning too. How do I plan to be uncomfortable so that I'm not freaking out when the discomfort comes?
That's true. It's because it's not a surprise. You know it's coming. You know it's there. So how do you not let it throw you off? Yeah, that's a good point. I love what you said too, because risk, I think all of these words mean something different to everyone, depending on
Yes.
your life. So a risk for you may not be a risk for me, or a risk for me may not be a risk for you, or someone else may not see it. Because there's a lot of things I've done and I'm like, oh, that was so hard. Someone's like, really? I thought that was easy for you. I'm like, no, it wasn't at all. So you never know internally what someone is feeling when they're doing something. So I love this idea of reflection for you because that will be required for that word. You have to ask yourself, was I shrinking back into what I normally do? Was I pushing myself? So I like that you're already thinking through what's an obstacle here, or what may keep me from embracing this word. How can I kind of work against that? Maybe that's even more powerful than having a perfect plan on how to use it. Like, how do I get myself back, back to it when I know I'm going to get off track, or I know it's going to be challenging? What are my strategies for kind of coming back to the word?
Yes. And also clearly defining what that word means to
Yes.
me. What
Yes.
your word of the year, for people who are listening, what it means to you is so much more important than like the textbook definition. So really writing out what your word of the year, what for every area of your life, what that looks like
Yeah.
for you carrying that word throughout. And when I say a steward, I really mean like to be a steward of your vision, or even like to live your life out in the way that you look back at the end of 2024 and you're like, okay, I really put the effort that I knew I was capable of doing. I put it in,
Yeah.
did my
Yeah.
best. You have to know what it requires to steward that word, to steward your life in a way that's like satisfactory to you, because
To
you're the one that
you.
has to
Yes.
answer to
To you.
yourself.
We don't know. No one else can know. So what I actually do, I will look up every definition version of the word. I will like go to multiple websites and I'll have four or five of them. I'll pick one that most closely aligns with what I want, or I'll mesh them together and create my own definition. And then I create a printable, maybe it's a mug. I try to create something physical to say, remember, this is the definition that you had for that word for that year. And that's been really helpful to keep that in mind of what does this word mean to me?
I love that. I love that you print it out and have it like a physical version that you can keep with yourself. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really good. That's a really great approach. I want to
Or
know, what's your word of the
yeah.
year?
So my word of the year for this year is create. I you know this because you know me pretty well. I write a lot. I have a lot of ideas. I sometimes make things. I don't always stick with it. When life gets hard, it kind of falls off. And I don't necessarily share it. So for me this year, I want to lean into that creative part of my brain. I want to make more things, not just have the idea for them. And I also want to share it more. I like to write, and I think I'm ready for, these titles for blog posts I want to do to not just be on my phone, but to actually be created out in the world. Yeah, I got feedback that my word is also connected to joy. So that's a second word. I feel like both of them may be my word for this year, but create and
What
joy.
do you mean you got feedback? Or
Yeah, so I was chatting with my therapist about my word of the year, and she was saying, tell me more about it. And as we spoke about it, she's like, oh, I feel like at the root of that is really joy underneath the word create. So that got me thinking, like, for me, the word of the year, it just comes to me around between October and December every year. It comes to me. It's just a thing that happens. And create was a word that came to me, but I also do believe this idea of joy is important too. So I don't want to give up create as a guidepost for the year, but I think I'm adding joy on there. Second word of the year.
hmm yeah, I think it's fun to have multiple words.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of that, like, what is the value under the word, really. Like, what are
Hmm.
you really getting at when you commit to this word? And yeah, that makes me really happy to hear, though, that like you're able to commit to something that's going to inevitably bring you joy.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's
Yeah.
the whole point of the creation is that it does bring great joy,
Mhm.
which I don't know. I know I could always use always use an extra dose of joy in life.
For sure. For sure. And then as adults, like I was scribbling on my phone the other day. I was trying to figure out my next hairstyle and I was showing
Ooh,
my sister on my notes app, like doodling. And I was like, this is what I have in mind. And it reminded me how much joy like drawing brings to me. I haven't done it in so long, but as adults, it's really important to find those sources of
yeah.
being childlike again and then not having this jaded or like too know all things,
Hmm.
too grown point of view.
Totally agree. Yeah. I think we need to learn how to play more as adults. Have more fun, more play.
Totally. Yeah. That makes it so much easier to just be well-rounded, and to not be so strict and stern in how we have to show up at work and in family and relationships, but it gives us more wiggle room to just be humans at the end of the day.
Yes, to just be human. So we have our words for next year. Yours is risk, mine is create/joy. I know we're coming to the end of this year. Is there anything surprising that you learned from this year when it comes to your word of the year?
That's a great question because it's the context of
Mm,
why the word of the year is the word of the year. Like we've
yeah.
gone through a year and
Yep.
we want to go into the next year differently. The context of choosing my word, risk.
Hmm.
This is how we spoke about it last time, our last call. I remember being like, I'm gonna be taking more risks this year. I'll give some context for people listening because the last 2.5 years for me have been risky in that I left my corporate career and I really left everything I knew behind and made a decision to live a completely new life that's more aligned to my purpose. But that 2 year, 2.5 year gap period was really a lot of dismantling, unlearning, a lot of waiting, a lot of unknown. And I started to get some traction at the end of this year. And it felt like a resurgence of like, all right, it's time to start taking risks in a new way. You took a really big risk 2 years ago.
Hmm.
And now it's time to level up the way that you're thinking about risk. So it's
Mm,
not just about me doing things in my own effort, but risking from a place of a faith and knowing that
ooh,
there is so much more that I'm entitled to, that
yeah.
unless I really step up and ask for what it is I need to be at the next level, not what I need to be at this current level,
Yeah.
but what I need to thrive at the next
Mm,
phase and where I'm going, then I will not get there. And it has been a 2 year, 2.5 year waiting period that has
yeah.
been very challenging, very hard to go through. And as soon as I got just even like a droplet of like, here you go, your risk has some reward to it, that was the fire I needed to just say,
Okay. Yeah.
all right, let's go. Let's do this, I'm not just in my head about things anymore. Like it's now tangible. I'm seeing the results of the risks that I took, and it gave me more energy to continue taking more risks and to believe that it was possible to reach,
Yeah.
those dreams and those goals that I have. So yeah, that's what I learned about this year. The waiting period is challenging. And
Yes.
and I saw for myself that okay, things do happen in that waiting period. I was explaining to you last week, one moment I'm crying in the parking lot, and the other I'm getting really great news. Life is so up and down, and there's so many
Yeah.
unknowns. and just knowing for myself the difference of, okay, this is what stagnation looks like for me versus this
Mm,
is what growth looks like. And just getting that sense of hope, honestly, was really the ignition for moving out of stagnation and into action.
I love that it's almost like a full circle moment.
It really is. It really is. And we're recording this on the last day of 2024. And we reconnected almost a year ago, like in the
Yeah, it was January.
first 2 weeks at the top of this year. So it is full circle in that way too.
Oh,
Oh, after
yeah.
a year of reconnecting, we got to see each other through so many different phases of 2023 this year. And so it's nice that I really did want to record before the year was out so we can have this true reflection moment.
Oh, that's true. I love that you mentioned that. I didn't think of it like that. But yeah, it was early January, and now we're in December, and we talked a lot about planning.
And we did so little planning.
We did so little planning.
Which is what I love about which is what I love about disrupt the defaults, because so much of your philosophy is like, it's not about the thing, it's about the stuff that surrounds the thing,
Yeah.
it's about the
Yeah.
humanity around why are you planning and what do you want to get out of planning.
Yes.
And yeah.
I love that. And making room for the surprises in life, because I know my 2023 word was expansion. And I was thinking all these things about opportunities and career and all these, I don't know, just other areas. I know my health was on there. I believe I wrote about it at one point. I don't even remember. I don't even remember. Things changed so much. I don't even remember what I was thinking in January of 2023. But I think I shared this with you, and I know I shared it with a few other friends that it I was expanding in all the ways that I did that I didn't expect. So I have actually just pulled it up. I said I was going to expand my giving. I did that. Spend more time with people I love. I did that. My capacity for rest, stillness, and presence. I did that too, expanding my career comfort zone. So I did do the things, even though life got off track. But the biggest thing I expanded this year was my heart. And I didn't see that that was the underlying theme of all of that. And I remember in July, I did a no TV, no social media month, and I read books. And I set a goal to read like 20 books before the end of the year. I ended up reading 22, I think. And most of them were rom-com books, which I don't read fiction. And there are all these love stories. I was journaling about what love feels like and all these other things. And there was this big surprise I got to now, and I'm looking back at my word and I'm like, oh, I expanded my heart. That was the big expansion of this
Mm,
year. Um,
mm,
so that was a fun surprise. And I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier that you can plan to do all these things and you may do them, and that's great. But the most beautiful part is, all the things that you couldn't have planned for, the little surprises. That, at least for
yeah.
me, I find that's the beauty of having this word of the year because it just gives you a lens to look back on everything. And if expand wasn't my word, I wouldn't have noticed that
Right.
change in my life because I wouldn't have been thinking about like what was I expanding this year? What was the theme? I wouldn't have been reflecting from the lens of what did I expand. So I think that's a special thing too, to just take time, even if you picked a word in January, you feel like you did nothing related to that word. Take a moment and just look back over the year and see maybe where that word showed up in your life and you didn't expect it or you didn't plan. Maybe it showed up in a very different way. And that's why you don't think you did anything related to the word or your year wasn't related. But I think if you look back with that lens, you may be surprised with what you see.
Mm, so many good things. What I'm thinking about is the definition of expansion, like the
Mm,
fact that it means you're going to go beyond what it was that you originally started with.
yeah,
And so there's no way you could have known that you're going to be
that's true.
expanding, your heart area because you hadn't done that in that way before.
Yeah.
And the beauty is that we are always, every day we wake up like physiologically, we're different every single second, but we
Mm,
wake up new every day. And so even if you have a repeat word of the year or you've
mhm.
done a word of the year in the past that you're coming back to, you're a completely different person. And how you move through it in that year is going to have a completely new meaning for your life and your future and whoever it is that you connect with. I love that your word was expansion because it encapsulates so much of what a word of the year even means. Like when
Yeah.
you're choosing a word of the year, it's because you're trying to do something different and
Yep.
you're trying to be a new version of yourself
Yeah.
or improve an area of yourself. And I think that's actually a really perfect way to think of what a word of the year means. It's an invitation to expand in some way.
Okay. I'm gonna write that down, that definition. Word of the year, an invitation to expand in some way. Yeah, so maybe it's not even about, you don't have to have a list of all these things to do because it's about who you're becoming. And that's the invitation to become a different version of yourself. And I think all of us naturally do that, whether we like the version that we've become or not. We're all
Literally.
becoming some version of ourselves. So you may as well be thoughtful and move in the direction of the things that you want to do.
Yeah, intention. It's about bringing intentionality into how you're growing because we're always
Yeah,
changing.
that's true.
Like Lauren Hill said, if you're not growing something, something, you dying. Like if you're not any living thing that's growing,
Yeah.
it's confirmation that it's living. And if it's
Hmm.
not growing, then it's dying. So
Very
yeah.
true. And you just have to be honest with yourself about where you're at right now. And that's the beauty is we can change. You don't have to do this on January 1st. You could do this in March. You can do it in April. It doesn't have to be a January thing that you decide to change or to grow. Yeah.
Literally. I have two sisters, and one of them was asking for us to just make some time to reflect in the new year.
Nice.
And I remember we were looking for so many, or she was looking for YouTube videos for like prompts
Hmm.
and stuff, and really wanting some guidance on how to reflect and then how to move forward. And I kept coming back. There's this long document that, are you familiar with Zim Flores? She runs several businesses now, but she
Oh,
founded
Travel
Travel
Noir.
Noir.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So she, a couple of years ago, emailed out this annual life review document, and now she has
Mm,
a planner based around it.
okay.
But I started going through that as a framework for looking at every area in my life. And it's such
Hmm.
a great resource for anybody who wants like a deep, deep, deep dive into what happened every month of this year. It was January, February, March,
Okay.
April.
So this is a deep dive. Nice.
Yeah. So I'm bringing that up because sometimes we don't have any space or context for like what happened this year. Emotionally, it can be really challenging to understand and parse out all the things that we've grown through. But
Hmm.
sometimes you just need like a um, template or framework for how
True.
to see things. And I remember just reminding my sister of that resource
Hmm.
because sometimes it could feel so overwhelming to be jumping into a new year and feeling like, oh, I didn't take the time that I needed to. It's just another day, and we
Yeah.
put so much pressure on it. But you said, pick this up any moment of
Hmm.
the day, of the year, and give yourself context. But the most important thing to do is to just start writing down and reflecting, or
Exactly.
if you need to do voice notes, whatever, but just start when you feel the urge to.
Is that an online resource? What you mentioned, the reflection.
I don't think it's public, but what is public now is, and she just launched, is a review, like a
Oh, okay.
planner. Yeah,
Oh, okay. A
so
planner. Nice.
it's called Annual Review, and it's a physical, hard, you know, notebook that you can purchase and have that. So that is a resource that people can buy.
Definitely check that out. Physical resource. I also can put together a short, I don't know, a few pages, something digital people can download to help just kind of get started. So I'll put that up.
I do have a vision, mirroring your vision workbook. I'll send that to you,
Mm.
but that's
Oh, thanks.
also a resource I created for people who are wondering how to bring what's in their head out into the world,
Yeah.
there's just some basic reflector prompts and space to write out what you need to be asking yourself in order to bring vision to life.
Perfect. Okay, guys. Sounds like you're going to get lots of resources. So
Yeah.
I will put those up on the website, disruptthedefaults.com. And last thing before we go, accountability. So I know we meet twice a month, every other week. And I will ask you if you bring things up throughout the year, I'm going to ask you about the risk and what does that feel like? And we're going to check in on that. And I know you're going to do the same for me when it comes to how I'm creating things, where I'm experiencing joy. And we're able to encourage each other in those ways and create room for that reflection that you mentioned. Because sometimes you just go through life and forget to slow down. So it's good to have people in your life to remind you. So that is something I think I really embraced in 2023 and want to do more of going into 2024. Sharing, it can feel really scary, but sharing with people, these are things that are important to me right now. This is what I want to work on. These are things I want to do this year. And then they'll ask, like, people who you know are going to ask you about it. They care about you. They want to see you as your best. Like, they're going to be there for you when it's hard. They're going to encourage you. So they're going to challenge you. Having those people and sharing openly with them, because we've talked about this all year. Whatever you're working on creating, it cannot happen in a vacuum. You need other people. You need other people.
My goodness, the lesson of the year. Yes. Yeah. As entrepreneurial minded women, especially, we need to remember that we're not an island, and it behooves us to not be martyrs for our vision, for our purpose, like to really be in community.
It's always nice to have people who will reflect you back to you.
Mm-hmm. And reflect where you want to be,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
where you've been, and be able to mentor. We need that feedback. We need that. Yeah, I'm excited for more of that this year too.
Yeah.
In real life, in real life.
In real
Okay.
life.
Because I realized I was looking for a new therapist. I'm like, I'm not doing no more Zoom therapy.
I
I
know.
I
Zoom.
have only ever known that. I started therapy in the
Okay.
pandemic, and I was
I
like,
see.
this ain't it no more. I
Yeah.
can't.
I'm
I
seeing.
need physical. Yeah. Even doing like the vending this year for Purpose Rosa in real life at different markets was just
Mhm.
so life-giving. And it is important to know like what you need to thrive. Like just giving myself more opportunities to be in real life is going to fuel so much more like energy on my part to show up and really live my purpose in a way that's like feels good. So yeah.
I totally agree. Quality time is definitely also up there as a love language. Nothing
Mm.
beats that face to face, in person connection. So hopefully we will get to see each other next year because we've
We
been zooming.
literally, it feels like, honestly, it feels like we've seen each other in
I know
person, but we have not.
we
We have not.
haven't.
We will. We will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much. I've enjoyed, as always, chatting with you. Appreciate you for taking the time. I know you're very busy, so thank you. And if people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Well, you can find me at purposerosa.com. And I have my own website too, Yarminiah.com. You can link that in the show
Yep,
notes
I'll
for
link
the
it.
spelling of it.
Yes.
And if people want support with creative vision and a community of people who are also vision oriented, you can find the vision session on either of those websites. And
Perfect.
that's really, yeah, the three places that I'd love to support people in creativity, purpose, and vision.
Well, I will link all of that in the show notes. And thanks to everyone for joining today. I hope you have a great ending to 2023. I know this will be posted in 2024, but also I hope your year is off to a great start. And if you did not think about, what you want for your year on January 1st, you're not too late. You can do that anytime. So Good luck with what all you're doing, and you can check out the website for those resources. Thanks, Jarminia.
Thank you.